Hello, everyone, and welcome to How to Win. I'm here with Chris Collins, who's our regular co-host for the show, and I'm also joined by Rachel Jacobson, who is recently been appointed about 5 months ago as the CRO of Infinite Reality and President of Business Ventures and Partnerships, and formerly was in the specific role of President of the DRL. Following this new role started as following the recent acquisition of the DRL by Infinite Reality. So, Rachel, welcome to the show. Great to have you. To set the scene a little bit, just do a better picture of what I did, of sort of talking about you and your background as it relates to not just the role with Infinite Reality, but also your background in the sports industry.
Definitely. Well, Nick, wonderful to be here. Very apropos how to win. I think that's always been core to my DNA that we'll get into. But as you mentioned, I'm the recently announced President of Business Ventures and Partnerships for Infinite Reality. Prior to that, the last 4 years, I was leading the Drone Racing League, really taking a partnership with a founder that had built a company to 5 years and was ready for the mainstream, and how we blitzscaled that. So incredibly exciting that we got acquired several months ago. And now there is a bigger ecosystem as we build for sports and e-commerce and so many industries that are best served with how technology has evolved over time.
So paint the picture for those that haven't followed too closely the DRL journey prior to the acquisition. The reports are that the acquisition was for a reported $250 million to put you as part of this Infinite Reality business, which has been scaling for some time now with various acquisitions and growing. Reporting values are being well into the billions of its business size and scale, with another acquisition of around $450 million in July. So lots of growth there. I mean, what we want to talk to start to set the scene, I suppose, a little bit is about the journey with DRL, how you were able to blitz scale it and grow the business to a position where this acquisition could come to life, and also the journey you've gone through since then of sort of navigating that acquisition and how that's been to reposition yourself within that bigger company and coming up with the right strategy and approach to move forward. So starting with DRL a little bit, could you just set the scene there of what are some of the things you had to do or have gone through to get it to that point of acquisition?
Definitely. Well, I think I'll back us up a little bit prior to DRL and why the investors really found the magic between partnering me with the founder of the Drone Racing League, which really dates back to my first 21 years of my career was at the NBA. So hired from David Stern right out of college. And really that's where I cut my teeth and was able to see firsthand the visionary leadership of David and now the current commissioner, Adam Silver, and just this was a league that had a global scope, that had philanthropy at the core of everything that they did, and was intersecting technology and innovation with a professional sports property. So I think when you listen to all of those pieces and you think about being on the front lines for, like I said, 20 plus years, I am grateful because I had the good fortune to be in those boardrooms and really watch the scaling of a fan base using technology to power these unbelievable experiences for the teams, in-game entertainment. So you put all that together and you think about running those same plays for these up and coming types of sports properties. You don't need to recreate the wheel. And that was one of the areas where I showed up on day one. I understood that we had built the fastest racing drones in the world. We own the technology and patents, and we had brilliant engineers that woke up every day to make sure that they flew safely, secure, and everyone was really entertained by what we were doing. So when I showed up, I dug in on the fan base. Who are these fans? How do we market to them? Where are their gaps in a fan base? So I looked at I looked at the fans and I figured out where the Drone Racing League could really anchor to scale the business. And what we found was there was a whole generation that we deemed tech setters. We actually came up with that because what the characteristics were, they loved technology and innovation, but didn't necessarily care about Travis Kelce. They maybe cared about what was happening with Taylor Swift and music, but sports, I think you understand that, equation is they really were wired to be excited about things in a different way. So when you look at that number of tech centers, there's 800 million people, and there's 70% of the DRL's fan base that didn't follow traditional stick and ball sports. So I pointed to that 800 million and I said, we're going after that fan base. And that was one of the things that we did immediately is we generated the right content. We made sure that we were showing up on the right social and digital platforms to really feel like this was a sport for Gen Z to call their own. So that was on the marketing side of things. When you think about building a fan base with Teflon to sustain 50, 100 years, when you look at Formula One, the NBA, and the NFL, I said, they've already, had their successes. They've already learned from some missteps. I don't need to recreate the wheel. Let's look at what is that equation that will marry up for a roadmap that would allow us to scale quickly. So that was really the plays that I ran on the fan base. And then on the commercial side of things, you think about every sports team and property, well, they have sponsors and partners. And I went out and I figured out that we were bringing a net new audience. So talk to any marketer, they don't want to duplicate their investments on the same fan base. But what we were able to do was really go to T-Mobile and Google and the US Air Force and others that have well vested in sports. But what we went to them was a new opportunity to really get a younger generation to grow up with their products or their services because they're wired to like what those companies were selling or offering. So I brought in the commercial side of the business along with the fan base and delivered this product in the way that they wanted. And we saw this hockey stick growth literally overnight. When you look at platforms like TikTok going from 500,000 to now at 5.4 million in 12 months, we knew there were places where we could win. And then we also took really methodical steps around if we were going to go internationally for a race, we better have done our homework that population was ready for a championship drone race. And we didn't have too many challenges when you think about so many opportunities outside the US, as well as here at home. I live in New Jersey, that are fighting for market share around technology leadership. So what the Drone Racing League really is, it's a real world case study for so many of these companies where their products could be endemic to our drones and we could be utilizing so many areas of their services to deliver to our fan base.
Look, I've watched some of the DRL footage, and it is incredible. And you see fans lined up around some of the stadiums and watching the drones go in and out of some of those the gates. It is extraordinary. So it is something to watch. For those listening in, do find some time to get on social and check out some of it in action. Rachel, one of the things that stand out to me, and you made a point of it running through your approach there, which Chris, I'll bring you in a second on that, but you talked about going to partners with a new offering and a new audience. I mean, some of the partners you've brought on board are some of the biggest brands in the industry. You've got Google Cloud getting on board, Allianz, T-Mobile. You mentioned the US Air Force. Pretty big organizations to get on the books early on. There seems to be quite a what would you call it? Like a a level of standard there that you've really committed to in terms of bringing in high-end partners on board who are adding value probably to the event as well as buy into this opportunity that you talked about, the tech setters. You said, can you just talk a bit through about how quickly they were, what sort of types of, I guess, commercial deals were you looking at there? Was it traditional sponsorship partnerships? Was it a bit of a hybrid approach of bringing their tech skills to the table as well as integrating them into the DRL experience? Just talk us through what the types of partnerships you were bringing to life there.
Yeah, I mean, it was really all of the above. We were able to have very thoughtful conversations with these companies and understand their pain points, understand where there were gaps in partnerships that they had, products or services, again, we could use to really use our sport as that real world case study for their sales team. When you think about everything that makes up a drone to get it in flight. And what we found was we really built the most innovative types of partnerships. So this wasn't a logo slap. It wasn't a jersey patch deal. This was literally lighting up communities of people for Google Cloud. It was developers all around the world really excited about getting the pilot data. So think about this. It's like the fastest pilots that fly our drones, using those 12 pilots' data of how they manipulated the drones. And never before had we released that, and giving anyone, particularly developers that leaned into this, with this Google Fly Cup challenge, a developer that gets this unbelievable data set and then uses it to build on Google Cloud to help put forth a manipulation of how that pilot should tackle the course. So those were the types of programs where, I would say on the first day, if you're just looking for logo exposure or brand recognition, we're probably not your people. However, if you're looking for us to tell an incredible story that really comes to life through this innovative partnership, there's something special we can do together.
So, Chris, bringing you in here, so listening to Rachel's approach when she joined DRL, just what more generally, if you were working with one of your clients in a similar position, joining a new organization, what are some of the first steps that you would recommend taking to work out how to grow the business? Whether is it similar looking at the audience first, the sales and marketing proposition, or is there something else you would really prioritize?
Yeah, no, I think, Rachel, what you said was this is a great case study in how to do it right. And I think it speaks to that. One of the things that was kind of coming to my mind as you were speaking, especially since we've been focusing on kind of the marketability aspect of athletes and kind of how that ties to sport over the last number of years, there's so much that we don't touch or don't get into when we're looking at it from a global standpoint, but is there and is meaningful. And so when you look at something like DRL, just doing all the right things. So we built a model out with like 19 different drivers. And one of the hardest ones for us to touch on from a global standpoint is kind of the momentum aspect that you're speaking to, or even a focus aspect. So, we tend to look at reach and a widespread demographic appeal, but that's just one look, right? So when you kind of zoom in and say, here's an actual sliver of an audience or a demographic that we want to hit, there's so much more involved in there. And we've been kind of training our models and looking to see how can we take this from a global perspective to a more regional or more demographic type of perspective, leveraging traditional types of drivers, but also building in those new momentum type of drivers that won't show up when you're just looking at, traditional broadcast coverage, traditional sponsorship, traditional social media followings or whatever. So really capturing what you mentioned, that hockey stick type of growth, how to build that in to put that side by side with some kind of tried and true brands or sports that are out there, because there's a ton of marketability when you focus the way that you did. And I think that was very insightful and kind of represents a lot of, I guess, some lessons learned from like the NBA, which does a really good job on the global standpoint that we see in our model.
So Rachel, further to Chris's point there, regards to the focus on audience, Can you just quickly run through some of the steps you took to actually get this, that mapped out, that you were I think you said 800 million, if I remember correctly, tech setters were the key group. What were some of the active steps you took to identify that group before we move on to the next sort of stage and iteration of this conversation?
Yeah. So I think going back to running the successful plays, when I showed up at DRL, I had a pretty vast Rolodex of people I had worked with throughout my career. And one of the first calls I made was to Shelly Passara at Wasserman, who heads up all of their data and analytics among so many other areas within her oversight there. And we partnered with Shelly and her team at Wasserman to really unlock, through proprietary studies that they do, through other syndicated research, where again, we could build the right data sets that would, double entendre, really unlock through their methodology this subset that we would go after. So once we had the data and research and we really then extrapolated those pieces, we were able to make much better decisions on where we would market. And that's where we really saw the growth. Is we could experiment in a number of places, but when it didn't work, I think I tell people I always fly pretty fast. Being an athlete, also in my career, I move at an incredibly fast pace. When you think about a company that's several years old that is literally wanting to be a mainstream sport with incredible ambition and a really lean team, you have to pivot quickly. So it allowed us, just going back to like, how did we do it? We partnered with the best in class. We understood the data. We made some calculated decisions. And when things were going great, we could double down. When things weren't, we could quickly pivot and be fine ripping the Band-Aid and just moving forward there. And that definitely has served the Drone Racing League very well. I think many other properties wait too long to call it underperforming or a failure. And I like to learn from those things that are not going as well, is not just to celebrate the wins, but so much of the key learning comes from the failures or the underperforming areas of the business, where you have to get in there and understand, like, why are things going sideways, or why is there misalignment among employees? So we were given the opportunity, or I personally was given the opportunity, with Nick's leadership as the founder and a really supportive board, is, Rachel, like, we want you to grow this, do everything you can around the fans, around the commercial, and we're behind you every day. So feeling that support really allowed me to take these big swings around our business that ultimately paid off, as you talked about, just a few years later, having this opportunity to be acquired and to really, what was stage appropriate for the Drone Racing League, is to allow DRL to become the F1 of the skies, that quantum leap that this property needed, that is best served as part of a larger organization.
So, Chris, curious from what Rachel's point there about failing fast and also reacting to both the wins and the losses. How do you make sure you're set up to do that well? Because I think even I run a media business, and sometimes I can look at a lot of numbers, and sometimes I'm not really always sure what numbers mean we should change and pivot and evolve. I mean, we can do some testing and see what happens, but what's your view on just how you set yourself up internally to make sure you've got the right structure in place to make sure you can evolve and adapt quickly when you start to see the right data points coming through?
Yeah, no, absolutely. So, I think first and foremost, it takes a results focus and a preference towards action, right? And kind of constantly assessing that and marrying that up. Are we getting the results we want? If so, okay, what action do we take to reinforce that? If we're not, what action do we take to change that? And then building that structure, both from how you're getting data, how you're analyzing it and using it, but then also the team that you're using, because you want a team around you that is conducive to that, right? You don't want to be fighting the whole change aspect. So understanding like what types of people you need, what types of behavioral characteristics, what type of cognitive types of characteristics your people need to have, and building that in to your team building it into your talent acquisition types of strategies, so that you're not always fighting that. Right. So a small group of leadership wants to be able to be agile and move, but the team itself isn't. And so now you're spending all this time and effort trying to figure out how do we, engagement strategies and communication strategies. And while those will always be kind of somewhat important and present, it's so much easier when you're able to, build that team and build that structure and build your decision making and kind of action taking processes around, again, focusing on those results and being able to quickly either reinforce your successes or learn from the things that aren't working and then pivot to, another course of action.
And obviously knowing when you've got internally the expertise that you need, or like Rachel did, look outside of it, going to people that she knew that had the best in class insight to give the answers that are needed is obviously a pretty key part of it all. Now, I'm conscious of time, Rachel, so I want to jump into what you fast forward a few years, I suppose. Now you've had this growth, you've evolved the business, you've scaled it. The conversation with Infinite Reality pops up, and now you've gone through this quite incredible, probably journey, I would imagine, through an acquisition. What's that been like for you? How have you found navigating that? And now that obviously your role has changed and taking a much more central role within the wider business.
Yeah, it's been pretty fluid. So haven't missed a beat when it was all coming together. I'm only wired to dive in, and also want to tackle the hardest challenges that may be in front of me. But what I found is Infinite Reality has been on a spree of acquisitions, but it's really led by John Acunto, our CEO and founder, who's a visionary. He has exited multiple companies to the top companies in the world, Apple and Meta. And what John envisions is the world of immersive web, where we are democratizing for everyone. We're giving the accessibility, we're giving the data back to the brands, back to the consumers. And that sounds lofty and audacious and all those words that say, how are you ever going to do that? But at our core, we're anchored in the best technology, and we are then going to market with the most innovative solutions. So I've jumped right in, and because the beating heart of the Drone Racing League was tech, it was a tech-powered global sports league. I feel like I haven't missed a beat. The good news is, what I get excited about is we're out of just the sports technology and entertainment landscape. I'm spending so much of my time on the solutions that we have for e-commerce. How do you bring a self-serve model to small and medium businesses where they own the data, where it's a SaaS model, and it's a brilliant solution of how they interact and better monetize for their customers? So from relaunching the website with a new chief marketing officer, Karina Kogan, to other executives, a chief product officer, Infinite Reality is really focused on not only rounding out their leadership team, but they've acquired this technology that is now stage appropriate as we go to market. And as evidenced by that was literally, I was maybe 60 days on the new payroll, and we announced a partnership, a 5-year partnership with Google. So having Google, who's been at the forefront of leading with AI solutions and really coming up with the best technology. When you look at their customer, it reads as the who's who, Fortune 500, Fortune 100. They are partnered with every category of business. And part of how this relationship came together was they looked at our solutions and they wanted it yesterday to bring to their customer base. So now we're in the midst of really going to market where they've not only helped with introductions, they're excited about how we can triangulate together to really build new opportunities for a current base of customers and how we bring new business as well to Infinite Reality and Google and others.
I mean, what's obviously interesting when you bring businesses together, like clearly is happening with Infinite Reality, you've got probably some great ideas on paper, what that can look like, how those businesses can enable each other and create a 1+1=3 opportunity by bringing those different types of companies together. Chris, just quickly from your point of view, I mean, how do you make sure that you can turn what's on paper basically into action? How do you make sure that these ideas of bringing, in this instance, different companies together can amplify the net value of all those companies coming together? What are some things to be, I guess, focused on to ensure that that is actually the case, that you can deliver real success from the strategy that's been mapped out in the beginning?
Yeah, I mean, that's important. I mean, what we typically see, and it's changing a little bit, but historically, what we've seen is there's a large focus on the strategy side of things. I like to say it's kind of like strategy and execution are two sides to different coins, where they should be, two sides to the same coin. If you're focusing on the execution aspect as much as you're focusing on the strategy formulation aspect and treating execution as a competitive advantage and capability within the organization, then you can start to see how they really marry together. In this strategic planning, you have the thought leaders and the visionaries, but then you also need the do leaders that are kind of in the room saying, okay, well, this is what we need to take into account. And here are the risks and here are the constraints that we work with. And this needs to be accounted for, so that when you actually get down to the execution side and kind of the projects that are associated, the operational efficiencies that you need to gain, you've already at least considered the level of effort, what risks you need to account for, but then making sure that there's that alignment, right? And that you can track. And again, it comes back to data. How are you making sure that the things that you're working on actually are contributing to that strategy and the strategic goals and the vision that you have? So in some cases, organizations will set up, we call them like strategy realization offices, but they have other terms. It could be enterprise project offices or transformation offices or things like that. But some type of governance mechanism that is maintaining that connection between the execution and the strategy. And strategy will change. Right. I mean, we know that. And especially as Rachel has indicated, it's pretty fluid sometimes. Right. So again, making sure that your processes are aligned, making sure that you got the right teams around it. So, there's a lot to it. But to sum it up, you kind of need to put the same kind of focus on building out execution capabilities and kind of managing that as you do in terms of putting the overall strategy together and working on the kind of strategic types of components that both of them need to come together.
And keep moving at the pace and rate that you need to, which sounds like Rachel is all for. Rachel, I'm curious, just in terms of now that you're into the thick of 4 or 5 months into this new reality, pardon the pun. What are some of now the challenges? If you could, I don't know, I can be as prescriptive as this, but what's one challenge for yourself, for the company, and even for the industry that you're in now that you're really focused on? Because it sounds like we've talked about a lot of positive things, great new partnerships, bringing technology to life. But are there any challenges that you're still having to work through as part of this new dawn for you in the Infinite Reality ecosystem?
I don't know if it's served up as challenges. What I'll say is just the reality of the business landscape right now is we are moving incredibly fast. And when you acquire companies, there needs to be integration of people, of processes, of systems, of technology, of pipelines, of customers and companies you work with. So that is definitely an area that we are spending time with, because there are great learnings along the way. They had acquired other companies before the Drone Racing League. So, we came on board. They already knew how, to check a lot of the boxes when you think about integration, but we are moving incredibly fast. And when you couple that with how technology is moving. So you have a company that's acquiring other companies and integrating people in all of those areas I just spoke about. And then you have technology running in parallel, where just when you felt like the products we were using to stand up different go-to-market solutions, we're having to navigate that in real time. And that's why we really are fortunate to be working with our partners at Google, because they're also aligned and they're on that forefront where they have the best data, the best information to help us with that learning curve as we think about not slowing down during these times, but really being well equipped to thrive and win in this environment.
I mean, one of the things that stands out when you're talking about partnerships like with Google, Rachel, is that I think a lot of people, that's the holy grail of partners. And you sort of started with that on your new journey to bring on someone like the big tech companies like Google. Just to wrap on this question, really, just what are some advice for those in the industry who are looking to try and partner with some of these bigger organizations who believe they've got something to bring to the table? Is there a different approach you need to take when talking to some of these big tech organizations that have to be considered if you want to get a seat at the table, or even turn those conversations into something of meaning for many of the sports properties that will be listening into this?
Definitely, everyone's been pitched a lot of what is involved in what we're talking about. However, they haven't been pitched a holistic end-to-end solution powered by Infinite Reality's engine with IR Studio and enterprise of what we're doing. So you have to know on those first dates, when we go in and meet with companies, I know there's been a lot of people that came before me that said a lot of things that they did not deliver on. So we've really used that to our advantage, that we've taken the best tech, we've taken the key learnings, and we are coming to you sitting across the table because we are that confident, where you look at the partners, you look at the companies we've acquired, and it's not like we need that to validate, but it's more of, we have the authenticity, we have the case studies, and it is almost the perfect storm of all of those ingredients that makes it appropriate for us to be winning over these companies. But it's not lost on me that the first couple of minutes, people talk about a couple of years ago, we tried something in this space, but we really come in showcasing what we've built and showing whoever the customer is, the partner, how we're set up with a roadmap for the future. So it's almost like I don't want to spend the time and the energy on everything that was behind us. I only care about the next months and years in front of us.
Well, Rachel, this podcast is all about how to win in the industry. And I think clearly the journey you've been on over the last several years has clearly been something aligned absolutely with that approach. So well done to everything that you've done and achieved with DRL and now with Infinite Reality. And thank you very much for joining us today.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thanks, Rachel.